Hi everyone, my name is Chelsea. Welcome to Little Mountain Ranch. I am very happy to have you here with us today. We're heading down to the garden, which is kind of an unusual thing for me to say in the middle of October. It is October 17th today, and I'm going to pick some celery from the garden for the turkey stock that I'm making up at the house. We had Thanksgiving here a couple of weeks ago, and I kept the carcasses, and now I'm going to turn those into some soup stock for the pantry. We live in the central interior of British Columbia, Canada, and it is normally very cold this time of year, and there's not usually a thing in the garden. This would be a good example of something that I have never seen actually bloom here. This is a Chinese aster that came in a package of perennial seeds that I planted here, along with these echinacea here beside it. And I keep it here because I think the foliage is really beautiful, but I've never actually seen it bloom. And here it is blooming in October, in the middle of October. It's the weirdest thing. If I sound a little short of breath, it is due to the smoke that we have here right now. Also a very unusual thing to experience this time of year. Our fire season is usually over in September, but with it being so dry, we haven't had any rain to speak of for months. And so warm, our fire season has extended into October. And my lungs are not liking it at all. This is the very last of the celery, but the fact that I am harvesting anything out of my garden on October 17th is pretty unbelievable. So that looks good. We are restoring an old cabin that was built in between 1920 and 1930, and I'll share with you why we think that in just a second. And then another little cabin that was built in the early 1970s, and that cabin was built to house the family that we bought the property from while they were building the ranch house, which is what we live in now. We are the third owners of this property since it was first homesteaded back in the early 1920s. The first building that we're going to be working on, and we're actually just cleaning it out right now, that's our afternoon project. You have probably noticed this old cabin if you've been here for a while, because I walk past it every time I'm heading down to the garden. So this is project number one. This is such a cool old cabin. These are old fir trees from our property, we're assuming. And this was built with an axe. You can see all the axe blade marks, and chinked with mud from the property, which is just the coolest thing. You can see it all up there. We were told by the people that we bought the property from that this was used as an ice house in the winter time. So there aren't any windows in it, but what we are thinking of doing is putting a window in this wall. It'd be kind of a shame to cut into these gorgeous logs though, but this overlooks the forest garden, and then turn this into a guest cabin, or one of our kids has shown some interest in restoring this old building and they would turn it into a cabin for themselves in that case. So as you can see here, these shelves are kind of on an angle, and that's because the floor is sinking over there and one of the bottom logs is rotten. So we would have to dig out the back of it and put in a new log in the bottom on both sides, so this side over here and over here. But it is such a cool old building. We do not want to see it rot. The evidence for the age of this building comes from all of those newspapers that you can see shoved in right there. On those, there are dates from the decade between 1920 and 1930. And yes, this is a solar system that we are going to be installing as soon as we possibly can. We've actually had it for a while. We just have not had time to actually get it installed, but that is definitely on the to-do list. The reason that this is in such good condition on the inside is because it actually has dirt on the roof here. So it was built with logs, then dirt was put on it, and then this roof was built over top of it. And this is the one that we're obviously going to have to replace. I'm not sure what we'll do with this. That'll be a question for another day. The other cabin that we are going to be working on is, like I said, this little one over here. We already have the roof fixed, the wiring done. One of my sons is an electrician and he wired it over the summer. What else do we have to do? So now basically we just need to insulate and drywall it and put the flooring in. It's very exciting. I've been wanting to work on that one for a long time. All right, let's get ourselves organized here. Okay, these are turkeys that I cooked for Thanksgiving in Canada. Our Thanksgiving is in October. And so we did 2 turkeys, and into these I filled these up with water, put all the bones. I have some carrots in there, some garlic, some onions in both, and now I'm going to stick the celery in there. And I'm just going to pick through this celery and take off anything that's looking too nasty and give it a wash and just throw it right in my stock pot. I think I'll use these 2 clumps right here because the leaves also have tons of good flavor in them. Once I'm done washing these, I'm actually just going to throw them right into the soup stock whole. I may break them up a little bit so they fit nicely. But when I'm making soup stock like this, I don't bother chopping everything up. I throw my onions in with the skin on, my garlic in with the skin on, and then I just strain it all out when I am going to can it up. So right into the stock it goes. Might add a little bit more water. I have been cooking these down already since earlier this morning. And if I had other fresh herbs right now, I would be adding those in here as well. A little bit of rosemary, some sage, and some basil. Since I don't have any fresh, I'll throw in a little bit of my dehydrated herbs from the summer. So this one is basil. Some of that beautiful sage from the other day. Throw in sage and turkey are a really nice combination. Throw a few in there. Sage is pretty strong, so you don't need that much. A little parsley. Doesn't this look beautiful? I think it looks beautiful, but I'm not going to add any salt to this until I actually jar it up. And when I pressure can it, I'll be pressure canning this for 90 minutes at 15 pounds of pressure for my elevation. The other thing that I do when I'm making stock, I'm just going to add a little bit more water to that. Once this has cooked and simmered all day, I'll turn that up a little bit. I will strain all of these goodies out of here and pick out all the meat, and I'll use that in maybe like a soup or something like that for tomorrow. But I will put it in the fridge overnight once these have cooled down, and then the fat will rise to the top and solidify, and then I can scrape that fat off before I put them in the canner. And the reason that I do that is because if there's a ton of fat in my stock, I find that I end up having more failed seals than I do if I remove the fat, probably just because it boils up during the processing of it in the pressure canner and then gets in underneath the seal, and then of course it can't seal because it's all greasy. I have to get some lunch ready for everyone, so I'm going to make up some buns. I'm going to show you a really simple bun recipe, and we are going to use those buns to make sloppy joes. The other day we did some canned sloppy joe mix, and I really wanted to try it and see how it was. There it is up there, so we'll grab 3 cans of that. Okay, first things first, we are going to collect up all our ingredients. I am going to make these using bread flour and stone ground wheat flour. I keep all of my bulk items down in my downstairs pantry, and then I just have smaller containers up here just so I don't have to run back and forth the whole time. We also need some yeast. And the same thing with my yeast. I buy my yeast bulk and keep it in the freezer, and then I just reuse this jar and keep it in my fridge so it stays fresher longer. What else do we need? We need salt. Just have to run down and fill up my salt jar. Okie dokie. We need some oil. A couple of eggs. And some honey. And because I'm a little bit short on honey, I'm going to use sugar instead. I don't know if I mentioned this in a previous video, but my beehives were robbed by wasps probably, I'd say 5-6 weeks ago or so. Like I mentioned before, the wasps were absolutely out of control this year, and they ended up robbing a ton of the honey out of my hives. So I left most of the honey in there so my bees could make it through the winter. and we didn't get that much honey, sadly. Much rather my bees make it through the winter than us have honey. So hopefully next year I will be able to put in some more preventative measures for my bees. I did put entrance reducers on. That's just where you block the entrance. So there's just a small entrance so the bees can defend their hive. But by the time I noticed that it was happening, that the robbing was happening, the damage had already been done. Okay, into this I'm going to add 3 cups of warm water. You're doing any kind of quick breads. It calls for a lot more sugar than a regular recipe would, and that's just because the sugar is actually what activates the yeast, and then the yeast start feeding on it, and with the extra sugar that whole process happens a little bit faster. So in this case I added half a cup of sugar into my 3 cups of water. And the other thing there'll be a lot more of, generally speaking, is yeast as well, for the same reason. So in this case it's 4 tablespoons of yeast, which is a lot of yeast. But these buns come together so quickly, and my kids really wanted to try those sloppy joes today, and I didn't have any buns, so quick buns it is. Always leave your sugar and your water and your yeast for a couple of minutes just to get those yeasts activated. Plunk in our 2 eggs. Six cups of flour, and I am going to use half bread flour, so 3 cups of bread flour, and then 3 cups of stone ground flour. I am so happy I have a large KitchenAid. This is the first KitchenAid mixer, this one here. You can see back there that I ever bought a very, very long time ago, and we quickly outgrew this and I bought the larger version, and one of the gears went in it. So we just got the new gear in the mail, and Dan's going to fix it for me so I can have my large mixer back. And I can hardly wait because this one is definitely too small for the size of batches that I normally do. When you're substituting whole wheat flour instead of white flour, keep in mind that whole wheat flour does absorb a lot more water than white flour does. So you usually need a little bit less than it would be if it was white flour. We need 2/3 a cup of oil and a teaspoon of salt. Looks about good. Maybe just a little tiny bit more. Okay, we'll let that knead for a little bit. Clean up our mess. Generally, when you're making any kind of bread, the kneading time is 8 minutes, but if you're going to use a mixer, cut it down to 5 minutes because it does a much better job of kneading than we do with our hands. And you can actually over knead your dough, and then it doesn't have nearly as good of a rise. Add some olive oil onto our pan here. Okay, normally what I will do is I will have it mix for a couple of minutes in the Mix Master. Then it's still pretty sticky. I'll put flour out on the counter and finish kneading it and adding the remaining flour right onto the counter. Where did I put that? There it is. Whenever I knead bread, I always think about my grandma. One of the clearest memories I have is of her in her kitchen kneading bread. Whenever we would come over, she would make white bread, really, really good white sandwich bread. And I can still picture her hands kneading the bread. If you're new to bread making, what you're looking for with your kneading is when you push in, you want it to spring back like that. I've just set my buns over here. I'm gonna let them rise for probably around 20 minutes. You can get away with as little as 10 minutes, but that is not the right lid, that one is. But I'm just gonna give it extra since I have a little bit of extra time. I am super curious to see how these are going to taste. This is the first time I've canned ground beef before. And I I'm a little bit skeptical. So I have done chicken and turkey and fish, but not beef. So let's crack a can and see. That's the sound we want. Somebody left me a comment the other day saying that that what her grandmother had always told her is that if it doesn't suck when you lift it up, make that suck sound, then you chuck it. And I think that that's a much better way than if it doesn't pop to throw it out, because I actually very rarely ever hear that like pop sound unless it's, say, a soup stock that's been pressure canned, then you might. But more often than not, it's this sound. Actually, I'll put it here since this is where the mic is. There we go. So that kind of sucking sound, that's what you want to hear. It still smells excellent. Smells just like it did when I put it in the can. Whoa. I've been asked before whether I reuse my canning lids, and I don't reuse them. I do not reuse them. I do use them for dry goods, but I don't use them for canning. Canning lids are still affordable enough that I would rather have the safety of a new lid than reusing them. Although I have seen people reuse them before. I'm just not quite sure how you would get a perfect seal, because prying the lid off, you always bend it just a tiny little bit. But I have seen it done, so. Okay, so we'll give this a try. The flavor is awesome. It tastes exactly the way it did when it went into the jar. The only difference is that the beef itself is in smaller little pieces than I'm used to kind of tasting ground beef, and it's more tough than it was when it went into the jar. But outside of that, it tastes exactly the same. And I honestly don't think the kids are going to notice a difference at all. Now we have, the buns have risen, so these are going to go in the oven at 400 for somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes. Don't those look pretty? Easy as can be. Let's pull out one of these buns and see how they are. Look at that. Doesn't that look delicious? They are perfect. Try a little taste. So good. Let's try with a little bit of this. That is going to be a delicious lunch. I'm just going to grate a little bit of cheese. Okay, we have a big old train bell, actually, from many years ago that was left here when we moved in here, and we use that for our lunch bell. Are you ready to eat?
Yeah.
We're gonna have sloppy joes.
I'm so excited.
Yum, yum. Okay, Missy, would you like to have your meat on the side, or do you want it in your bun?
On the side.
On the side? Do you want a little bit of cheese on top of it? Okay, Claire, can you go grab the carrot sticks from the fridge, please?
Yes, I can grab some.
These buns are really lovely. So this is that sloppy dough mix that I canned. So you guys have to tell me what you think. There you go, my lady.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So hungry.
Kid approved. Everybody thinks they're awesome. So we're gonna eat these up, get the kitchen clean, and then we'll get into baking. I just took a little bit of a tea break, but the kids are going to be home soon, so I am hurriedly trying to get supper done. And over here we have the turkey broth. I've taken it off the stove. I'm going to let it cool down, and then before bedtime tonight, I will strain it and put it in the fridge to can tomorrow. And some ground beef I've fried up, and to this I have added a bunch of taco seasoning, so cumin, salt and pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, what else? Chili powder in there with a little bit of sugar. To that, I am adding some pinto beans and some peppers from the pantry and from the freezer. See if that's all going to fit in there. It's going to fit. And then into that, I'm also going to add some canned tomatoes, and then I'll let that all cook up together, and I'll show you how we serve this up. I just went to take the lid off of this jar of tomatoes, and it just did not make a good enough sound for me. It kind of came off a little bit too easily, and for me, when in doubt, I throw it away, because it's just not worth it to me. That one sounded just fine. Smells fine. Looks fine. So I'm gonna drain some of that liquid out first. I only usually have to throw maybe, I don't know if all the canning I do, maybe 5 jars a year that I just feel like maybe aren't quite up to snuff, or I have a little question about it. Here, I'll bring you guys down so you can see this. It looks really beautiful. But once this cooks a little bit, just so all the flavors can kind of meld together, it will be ready, and the kids should be home any minute. Hungry as can be, I'm sure, since it's 6 o'clock. All right, I get to sit down and have another little break before the crew gets here. I decided to just go for one more cup of tea before the house gets really busy. Supper's smelling good though. See if I have any salsa up here. Oh, some salsa verde. We need to use up. Hi guys.
Elho.
How are you?
I got queen size pillows.
Oh, did you? Hey honey. How's it going? How was class, honey? Was it good? What? Oh, yes. Your sourdough starter?
Yes.
Claire is experimenting with sourdough, starting making her own. So she's been working on this starter, and it's all active now. When you switch out, honey, into the next one, put it into a clean jar, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so now I guess we just wait for dinner to be done. I'll show you what it looks like when it's all plated up. Okie dokie.
Freezing.
You're freezing? Why don't you go get a sweater on?
Wait, does these cookies. But
Are you looking at Crystal's cookbook?
yeah.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
You.
All right, everyone, that is it for us today. Tomorrow I am planning on filming a video on all the food that we are going to be making for a trip that we're taking. We try, in order to save money, to make our travel food. So I thought I would share that with you. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you again next time. Bye.